source tells me that it wasn't just the Baltimore Ravens. It was three teams: the Cleveland Browns, the Philadelphia Eagles, and it also was Baltimore Ravens.
We thought we had the Shedeur Sanders draft story all figured out. But wow, we were only scratching the surface. Cam Newton just dropped a bombshell that flipped the whole script on Sanders' shocking slide to the 5th round. This wasn't some small leak. Newton went on his 4th and 1 podcast and revealed a twist so wild it had the entire football world gasping. On September 17th, 2025, Cam confirmed the already jaw-dropping rumor about Shedeur rejecting the Baltimore Ravens. But then, he threw gasoline on the fire by claiming Sanders actually turned down not 1, not 2, but 3 different teams on the same day: the Ravens, the Philadelphia Eagles, and yes, even the Cleveland Browns were on that list, according to Newton's inside source. Can you even picture this madness? We're talking about a quarterback who had already plummeted from projected top 10 status all the way down to the 5th round. And yet, somehow, he was calling the shots like a seasoned superstar. That kind of pull is unheard of, and the sheer nerve it took is absolutely wild. This revelation doesn't just rewrite the story, it rips it apart and forces us to rethink what player power really means in today's NFL. For a rookie to flip the table on 3 franchises in one swoop, that's next-level guts and strategy. To really grasp how insane this is, you gotta look back at what Shedeur brought into the draft. The man wasn't just some random prospect, he was a college football sensation, stacking up over 10,000 passing yards, 99 touchdowns, and completing 69.3% of his throws during his years at Jackson State and Colorado. Scouts had him pegged as a top 10 lock, the type of player you build a franchise around. But instead of a smooth ride to stardom, his draft night turned into chaos, because Sanders wasn't about to let just any team decide his future.
You only report some of the truth and not all of the truth. You are, in some cases, if not all cases, just as guilty as telling a lie. Because if you only have a certain amount of information that you're pulling from, it clouds your perspective.
And the first crack in the story came even before Newton spoke up. On September 14th, ESPN insider Adam Schefter shocked fans by revealing the Ravens had plans to scoop Shedeur with the 141st overall pick. Nobody realized then that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Sanders' camp made it clear they didn't want him stuck on the bench behind Lamar Jackson. That first report alone had jaws dropping, because we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens, one of the most respected organizations in football with a coaching staff that knows how to mold quarterbacks into stars. But just when fans thought the story couldn't get any crazier, Cam Newton's follow-up revelation tore the whole narrative wide open. It wasn't just Baltimore on draft day. Newton claimed Sanders had sidestepped not 1, but 3 different franchises circling him in the 140 to 150 pick range. Suddenly, the chess game Shedeur was playing became way bigger, way bolder, and way more calculated than anyone realized. And Cam wasn't just spilling tea for clicks. He said he was correcting the media's lazy reporting. According to him, by only showing the Ravens angle, the mainstream press painted Sanders as if he was too good for Baltimore, when in reality, the truth was way deeper, and honestly, way more respectful. This wasn't a diva move, it was strategy. Newton flipped the script, showing Shedeur not as arrogant, but as a young quarterback thinking long-term, protecting his career, and showing respect to stars who already had their thrones locked down. Timing made this even wilder. Newton's 4th and 1st podcast episode, titled Cam Finishes Gilly, Chad's 5th Round Reality, and Joe Flacco Stinks, dropped September 17th, 2025, and within just 3 days, the Sanders segment exploded to over 1.2 million views across X, Instagram, and TikTok. Fans couldn't get enough, proving just how desperate the football world was to hear the real story behind Shedeur's stunning draft freefall. And here's the kicker. Newton didn't just name-drop the extra teams. He explained exactly why Sanders made those choices. According to his source, Shedeur had massive respect for Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, and he understood the cold reality. Unless one of them got hurt, his chance to shine would be buried under the depth chart. That context changes everything.
This is where the perspective gets skewed. Because you ask the question, why would Shedeur not want to go to Baltimore? For all the obvious reasons and all the optics that Alex Smith has stated. If any team has been on the cutting edge of saying, we figured out the recipe of drafting and developing good players to play great and elite, that's one of the teams that does it at a high level.
Instead of looking like a rookie who thought he was above certain franchises, Sanders suddenly comes off like a calculated businessman who refused to waste his prime years riding the bench. That's not arrogance. That's chess at the highest level. This wasn't about Shedeur Sanders thinking he was too good for certain franchises. It was about him seeing the bigger picture and knowing his shot at real playing time would be completely different depending on where he landed. Let's break it down. Take the Ravens, for example. Lamar Jackson, just 28, sitting on 2 MVPs, fresh off a 2024 season with 4,500 passing yards and 35 touchdowns. He's locked in through 2027 as Baltimore's unquestioned franchise quarterback. That's not just security. That's a brick wall blocking any rookie from sniffing the field. For Shedeur, backing up Lamar meant years of holding a clipboard, barely touching the ball on Sundays, and fading into the shadows while his prime years slipped away. Then there's the Eagles. The mainstream media barely touched this angle, but Cam Newton made it clear the logic was the same. Jalen Hurts had signed that monster $255 million extension in 2023, and in 2024 he was still cooking. 3,900 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, just 8 picks, plus another 600 yards with his legs. At 26, Hurts wasn't just secure, he was thriving, with Philly showing zero signs of looking for his replacement anytime soon. So why gamble your career sitting behind 2 quarterbacks who might not give up their jobs for half a decade? Newton kept hammering one theme. Not every opportunity is a good opportunity, and that's a whole new philosophy shaking up the NFL. See, old school thinking says late-round players should be grateful for any shot. Take the jersey, sit in the locker room, and keep quiet until your name gets called. But Sanders and his camp weren't playing by those rules. They were prioritizing the long game, protecting his trajectory instead of settling for short-term comfort. The reaction online was instant chaos. Within 72 hours, over 40,000 posts flooded X, TikTok, and Instagram with hashtags like Shedeur Snubs and Business Decision. Fans split right down the middle. Some praised him as a genius for controlling his destiny. Others slammed him as entitled, saying he was throwing away the chance to learn behind legends. But here's the real kicker. This story shows how power in the NFL is shifting fast. A new wave of players is done letting franchises script their careers. They're rewriting their own paths, even if it means rolling the dice with serious risk. Sanders could have taken the safe route in Baltimore or Philly, soaking up game from 2 elite QBs. Instead, he chose chaos in Cleveland, betting he could win a starting role and carve out his own lane. This revelation isn't just about Shedeur Sanders. It's about the entire system getting flipped on its head. For decades, teams controlled the draft, holding every ounce of leverage while players, especially late-round picks, were expected to sit down, shut up, and take whatever jersey they were handed. But now, we might be witnessing a new era where even fifth-round prospects feel bold enough to steer their own destiny. That's a power shift the NFL has never seen before. To really grasp the weight of this, you gotta look at how it all went down team by team. Cam Newton didn't just throw out names. He laid out a map showing how Sanders calculated his moves with the precision of a Wall Street trader. Each choice wasn't random. It was a chess piece in a game bigger than anyone imagined. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens, the first domino to fall. Adam Schefter broke their interest, and Newton later confirmed it. On paper, Baltimore looked like the perfect fit. The Ravens entered the 2025 draft with 7 picks, including number 141 in the 5th round, which they saw as a sweet spot to stash high-upside projects who could grow behind their established stars. This wasn't desperation. It was dynasty building. The Ravens' track record is legendary. Under GM Eric DeCosta, They've mastered the best player available with fit philosophy, producing stars like Joe Flacco and shaping Lamar Jackson into a two-time MVP. And with Lamar fresh off a monster 2024 season, over 4,500 passing yards, 35 touchdowns, still only 28 years old, the franchise was sitting pretty. Drafting Sanders wasn't about him being the savior right now. It was about grooming him as the next great Raven down the line. But that's exactly why Shedeur walked away. On the surface, it seems crazy to reject such a powerhouse program. Newton admitted Baltimore's organizational excellence made Sanders' decision shocking. But when you peel back the layers, it makes sense. The Ravens viewed him as a long-term project, a 2 to 3 year developmental piece who would sit behind Lamar in his prime. Sanders and his camp weren't trying to wait around for a shot that might never come. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. Internal evaluations had Sanders slotted as Baltimore's number, 4 quarterbacks on their draft board, behind names like Cam Ward and Quinn Ewers, but ahead of raw athletes like Jalen Milroe. They loved his pocket presence and deadly accuracy on intermediate throws, with that 68.5% completion rate in 2024 proving his efficiency. But their plan wasn't immediate playing time. It was patience. Years of it. That clashed with everything Sanders was aiming for. His camp wasn't rude, though. It was business. Sources say that around 2:28 p.m. on draft day, his agent David Mulugeta formally signaled no interest, making it crystal clear Shedeur wasn't about to spend his early career holding a clipboard in Lamar's shadow. Respectful? Yes, but firm. The message was simple. Thanks, but no thanks. We're not waiting 3 years to touch the field. Shedeur's pass on the Ravens wasn't about drama. It was pure business, handled sharp and professional. And when it came to the Philadelphia Eagles, Cam Newton made it clear. The situation looked just as locked down as Baltimore. Now this Eagles angle is wild, because unlike the Ravens, mainstream outlets never fully confirmed it. That's what makes Newton's claim so intriguing. It's insider tea that the big networks either missed or chose not to report. Let's set the stage. Philly was fresh off a 12-5 campaign in 2024, with Jalen Hurts locked into that 5-year, $255 million mega extension he signed back in 2023. At just 26 years old, Hurts wasn't just the leader. He was the franchise. He had just finished a monster season, 3,900 yards through the air, 28 touchdowns, only 8 picks, plus another 600 yards rushing with 12 scores on the ground. That's MVP-level work, and it left zero doubt about who ran that team. And here's the kicker. GM Howie Roseman had already laid out his priorities in pre-draft pressers. Philly was loading up the trenches and secondary with their 5 picks, including number 145 in the 5th round. They wanted edge rushers, corners, and O-line depth. Quarterback wasn't a screaming need, especially with Kenny Pickett waiting in the wings as a solid backup. But Roseman has history. He's sneaky about stashing quarterbacks as trade chips. Think back to Carson Wentz in 2016, drafted, developed, and eventually flipped for picks. Could Sanders have been his next play? A high-upside quarterback he could polish and later sell high? Newton's source swore the Eagles were in the mix, even if the mainstream stayed quiet. Newton hammered this point hard. Both Baltimore and Philly were no-brainer destinations if Sanders wanted stability and learning opportunities. That's why his rejections weren't just bold. They were shocking. Most rookies would kill to sit behind Lamar or Hurts, but Sanders saw something else. Years of waiting, wasted time, and no clear path to start. And that's what makes Cleveland the real twist in this saga. This wasn't some random pick. It was calculated. Browns GM Andrew Berry pulled off a subtle but pivotal draft day move, trading with Seattle to slide into pick 144. It barely cost them anything. A 6th rounder, 189, and a 2026 7th. Cheap change for a quarterback with real franchise potential. Cleveland's reasoning was obvious. Their quarterback room was chaos. The Deshaun Watson era had crashed and burned. They were patching it together with 40-year-old Joe Flacco as a temporary starter and Dylan Gabriel, the rookie from Oregon, taken in the 3rd round. Neither screamed future of the franchise. For Shedeur, Cleveland was different. Baltimore and Philly meant years in the shadows. But the Browns? That was an open competition, a real shot to step in and fight for the throne right away. Cleveland may not have had the shine of Baltimore or Philly, but what they did have was opportunity, and that's exactly what Shedeur Sanders wanted. The Browns' quarterback depth chart looked soft. An aging Joe Flacco hanging on, rookie Dylan Gabriel still green, and Dorian Thompson-Robinson fighting for relevance. None of them posed a true wall for a young gun with Shedeur's talent. Newton spelled it out clearly. Sanders didn't want to waste years warming the bench. He wanted to play football. And the timing of how this all went down? Insane. Between picks 141 and 144, we're talking a 20 to 30-minute window where phones were buzzing nonstop, calls flying in, and Sanders' agent David Mulugheta making split-second decisions. Imagine the pressure. 3 franchises circling at once, and every move shaping the next 5 years of a player's life. That wasn't luck. It was precision. Sanders and his camp came into the draft with one priority locked in: real snaps over big-name prestige. That's a massive break from old-school thinking. For decades, rookies, especially late-rounders, were told to take whatever spot came their way, sit quietly, and be grateful. But Sanders flipped the script, demanding a path to the field instead of a comfy seat in the shadows. And you can't ignore the role of Deion Sanders in all this. Prime wasn't just a proud dad, he was the strategist. As Shedeur's mentor and career architect, Deion had been dropping hints as far back as March 2025, warning that certain teams were off-limits. By draft night, his influence was obvious. This was as much about family planning as it was about football. Newton's framing of Shedeur's decisions as respectful strategy rather than arrogance is key. This wasn't about disrespecting Baltimore or Philly. It was about knowing those teams would lock him into years of waiting, while Cleveland gave him a real shot. Still, that didn't stop the takes from flying. Former quarterback Alex Smith blasted the move as incredibly short-sighted, saying Sanders would have been smarter to learn under Lamar or Hurts inside stable, winning organizations. But others praised the boldness, betting on himself, refusing to be buried, and taking control of his own destiny. And here's where it gets bigger than Shedeur. Newton's revelation lit a firestorm that wasn't just about one player. It cracked open a deeper debate about power in the NFL. Player agency versus organizational control. Prestige versus opportunity. Tradition versus rebellion. Sanders' draft night gamble may go down as a turning point in how young stars approach their careers and how much control they demand from day one. Because make no mistake, the ripple effects of this saga aren't done shaking the league. We're just starting to see how much this one decision could flip the NFL's balance of power forever. The fallout from Cam Newton's revelation didn't just stir headlines. It detonated a full-blown media circus that shook the NFL to its core. Overnight, Shedeur Sanders went from being the kid who slid to the 5th round to the face of a bigger rebellion against the draft system itself. ESPN, Fox Sports, Bleacher Report, every outlet ran with the story, but the takes couldn't have been more divided. On one side, old-school analysts slammed Sanders, calling him reckless for passing up powerhouse organizations. They warned that gambling on Cleveland's dysfunction was career suicide. On the other side, fans and younger voices praised him as a trailblazer, a rookie brave enough to bet on himself instead of letting the league dictate his fate. The debate got so heated it spilled into locker rooms. Players across the league quietly admitted they respected the move, whispering that Sanders might have just opened the door for a new generation to demand control. Meanwhile, team executives were fuming behind the scenes, worried that if late-round picks started pulling the same stunts, the draft order itself could lose its iron grip. And let's be real, the league has never liked when players flip the script. We've seen it before with free agency battles, with NIL in college sports, and now with Shedeur Sanders rewriting what it means to be drafted. His choice to reject 2 powerhouse franchises for a shot at immediate competition in Cleveland wasn't just personal. It was revolutionary. Cam Newton framed it best. This wasn't arrogance, it was strategy. Sanders wasn't chasing the bright lights, he was chasing the ball. And whether you call it genius or a gamble, one thing is clear. The NFL won't forget this draft anytime soon. So now the question is, will Shedeur Sanders become the star who proved betting on yourself pays off, or the cautionary tale teams use to scare rookies back in line? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. This story is far from over. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're rocking with this breakdown. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. See you in the next one.